afternoon. Thank you for your flexibility on the timing, but as you know, for all of us, it's kind of busy days. We're delighted that Martin Griffiths has agreed to join us. Martin, as you know, is our humanitarian coordinator, emergency relief chief, and he's here to talk to you about the humanitarian situation in Ukraine, and then I will do the regular briefing, and Paulina will as well. Martin, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is that?
That's on.
Yeah, that's on. Yeah. Good. Thanks a lot. I have some sort of opening remarks as follows. So even before the recent events which have convulsed the world this week, there's been an 8-year-long conflict in eastern Ukraine, and that meant nearly 3 million people in eastern Ukraine already needed humanitarian assistance before the recent days across both sides of the contact line. And the UN and our humanitarian partners and the Red Cross movement have been responding to that need these many years. And this year alone, for example, UN-coordinated humanitarian convoys delivered over 150 tons of assistance to the most vulnerable people in the non-government controlled areas on that side of that contact line in the Donbass. Women, children, elderly, people with disabilities, those living close to the contact line and in the non-government controlled areas are the most in need. I'm talking now about the events of the day. They continue to require food, shelter, healthcare, water and sanitation, and protection. Like the Secretary General, of course, I'm extremely concerned about the impact of the ongoing escalation on civilians, everyday people, like us, like you and me. We, like you, are seeing reports of shelling on urban centers and other communities across Ukraine with unconfirmed as yet, reports of civilian casualties and damage to residential infrastructure. We're concerned about reports of population movement as men, women and children are fleeing in search, safety and protection. And I think it's fair to say that hundreds of thousands of people are on the move in Ukraine and out of Ukraine as we speak. I want to reiterate the statements made by the Secretary General that the UN and its humanitarian partners, all those people I have the fortune to work with, are committed to continue and indeed to expand our presence. We have not left, we are not leaving Ukraine. Obviously, our people there are bunkered down at the moment, but we're expanding our presence in Ukraine and scaling up efforts to help meet the needs of people affected across that country. And we have been doing this for some weeks. In the alarming phase of escalation, the safety and security of all our staff and their dependents is a top priority. We're currently facilitating the temporary relocation of non-essential UN staff and eligible family members within Ukraine for this purpose of their security and safety. There are no plans at the moment to relocate our staff outside the country, but we'll continue, obviously, to evaluate the developing security situation. We are bringing together our partners. We have set up an interagency operations center in Geneva, which is already in existence. I will be going there over the weekend. We will be launching an appeal which will bring together the needs for the region outside Ukraine under the leadership of UNHCR, High Commissioner Filippo Grandi, and the needs for people inside Ukraine. And we'll be putting that out within a few days, and we'll launch it indeed in Geneva, as is customary. Yesterday, the Secretary General announced a $20 million allocation from the UN's Central Emergency Response Fund to scale up immediate response. And we need this because we're now beginning to realize that the scale of need in these very, very extraordinary circumstances is going to be of the highest. We're going to need to use cash for the delivery of assistance, and we're going to need to use that cash safely. We're looking, obviously, at the impact of sanctions on our operations, and we're doing this in coordination with the International Committee of the Red Cross. We're going to look to, and we've had calls with and meetings with we're going to look to the generosity of donors, of member states, of donors more generally, to mobilize the financial resources that we will be outlining in that appeal that will come through in a few days from now. And perhaps the most important point that I want to make is that we need the safe, unimpeded access and protection of our humanitarian workers and the deliveries that they will be doing, that they will be resuming as soon as the security allows it, to all areas of Ukraine affected by conflict. Our humanitarian response, as you know, is guided by 4 simple but profound principles: humanity, neutrality, operational independence, and impartiality. And I'd leave you with just one comment from my colleague and friend David Beasley, the Executive Director of the World Food Programme, who was telling us just this morning that 50% of the World Food Programme's wheat for the world's programme around the world comes from Ukraine. The fallout from Ukraine in terms of costs, in terms of wheat, in that example, is something that, that is spooling out before us, and we have yet to see where this will lead. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. Ibtisam.
Hi, on behalf of the United Nations Correspondent Association, thank you for the briefing. My name is Ibtisam Azim from Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper. My question is first about the financial situation. How much money approximately we're talking about, and about the access and safety of your staff. Are you seeing any signs that worrying you? And could you please elaborate on the issue of the numbers? Like you said that probably are going to increase the numbers. If you could go more on that. Thank you very much.
Shall I? Yes, great. The financial situation. Well, right now, as we speak, and I was talking to agencies in Geneva this morning, we're trying to put those numbers together for this appeal that we will come out. But it's going to be well north of $1 billion. It's going to be for a limited period, for a 3-month period. So we will see the numbers, the financial, the figures quite soon. As soon as we have solid base for that, we'll put it out. Quickly going to your last question, and I'll come back to safety of staff, that this appeal, of course, will be launched very quickly. We need to get it out quickly. I had a meeting of the Interagency Standing Committee. That's the leaders of all humanitarian agencies, as you know, globally, yesterday, all of whom said we need to get that appeal out because we need to frame the nature of the need in Ukraine as subsequent to these events. We need it quick. But it's going to be based on projections, based on past experience, but based on projections. And I don't right now have a number of the people in need, which is going to be part of that. But I can tell you that even before this, we had 3 million people, as I said earlier, in need already in the Donbass. And we were anticipating further displacement up to another 1.8 million or more. But I would prefer not to be quoted on a figure for people in need for that appeal yet. It's being sorted out. Safety of staff, so far as I know, God forbid, but so far all our staff are safe, including those down in southeast in the Donbass area, both sides of the contact line, right in the heart of this hot war. We are relocating staff inside Kiev to places of safety and security. They, like all the citizens of that city this morning, spent a lot of time this morning in the shelters. They're still very much in contact with us. We have daily, hourly contact. Just now, Osnat Lubrani, the resident coordinator, the humanitarian coordinator, was on the call with the Secretary General. So they're there, but they're keeping safe. until the moment that they can get out and start to deliver assistance. But even while keeping safe, they're able to work together with the agencies, and particularly local NGOs, local partners, as we like to call them, who will be the key method of delivery of assistance, because they will know the numbers of people who need help in these coming months. So that's going on. It's a planning process of the highest importance while we are ready to move out and to deliver again.
Thank you. Pam Falk?
Thank you, Undersecretary General. It's Pamela Falk from CBS News. You mentioned that some of the staff, and just now again, are bunkered down a bit in Ukraine. Can you explain how, or if not quantify, at least explain how much of the aid deliveries are being delayed because no one can move things around? And second, looking at the pictures, looking from colleagues who are there, how much more, even if you can't put numbers on it and it's right in the middle, do you expect? I mean, obviously with the launch of the funding, you have some idea, but do you expect it to grow monumentally because of this? Thank you. The need, that is. Thank you.
Sure. On the delay, well, so far it's day 2 of the, this particular situation. So this is not yet a factor. And we don't know, like none of us know, when we're going to get back to make sure those convoys can move, those deliveries can be made. Of course, using cash, which goes directly to beneficiaries, and we, as you know, we've been using that in Yemen, for where I spent the last few years, quite extensively. Cash can be delivered by the internet, of course. So you don't need physical movement. So we don't anticipate at the moment any disturbance or delays of humanitarian supplies to those in need. We're watching it very carefully. Yes, we do anticipate very significant increases in numbers. I think, as you know, you've seen the situation much more than I. Just the extent of movement of Ukrainians is enough of a starter question for the increase in need. It's not the only question, because displacement, of course, is going to be a huge issue inside and outside the country. But we also anticipate interruptions of basic services, interruptions of pensions. We have yet to see the consequences of where this particular operation is going. And I mentioned this also in the context of other conflicts and crises, where you, like we did in Afghanistan back in August, September, where you can see pretty clearly some of the outlines of where the situation is going to evolve, but you also do realize as the days and the weeks go by that there are some secondary consequences. And I think the wheat figure is one of those. I think we're going to see an increase in prices. We've seen the energy prices going up, and we're concerned about that for the costs of programs in existence in other countries. We're also naturally concerned about that, about the secondary consequences, because we have some big appeals going for 2022. We're going to launch emergency appeals in March for both Yemen and Afghanistan. And we're going to ask donors to be generous. And as you can imagine, in calls that I've been in with some of those key donors, they already are worrying about the impact of what these needs, which are obviously incredibly important and a high priority, are going to have on others. We must not forget the others. We must not forget the world continues to exist and needs continue to be there, and we need to respond properly.
Thank you. Benno, German Press Agency.
Thank you. And the Secretary General Benno Schwingham with the German Press Agency.
Benno, if you could just remove your mask when you ask the question.
You talked about the hundreds of thousands of people on the move fleeing in Ukraine already. Can you share more of the knowledge you have about this? Where are these people going? How are they moving? And do you think do you share the United States view of up to 5 million refugees in this conflict?
That's a very good question for Filippo Grandi, as you can imagine. I'm not going to, but I do, because actually I don't know the answer to those questions, and I don't know how much we are going to see in terms of outflow to the neighbouring countries. UNHCR, under Filippo's leadership, is working with the agencies to develop an appeal for that, which will come out with ours we're working on inside Ukraine. It's anybody's guess, frankly, at the moment, to know whether the displacement, how much of the displacement is going to be outside and how much is going to be inside. Because the decisions that, of course, Ukrainian families are taking are decisions which we can't peer into as to whether to move or not. And I guess that's because they're still thinking that one through, and that depends on circumstances. So I'll tell Mr. Grandi of your question.
Edie Lederer, Associated Press.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffiths.
Edie, if you just take off your mask when you ask the question, it's easier to hear. Perfect.
Two questions. First, is it, as you said, nobody knows how long this conflict is going to go on. Is it fair to assume that the United Nations, particularly your office, has done or is doing long-term planning in case it does last for weeks and months? And secondly, in light of the impact particularly on energy prices, which will affect countries like Afghanistan and Yemen, but also donor nations, how concerned are you that this could impact how generous donors can and will be?
Good questions, Edie, as usual. On the second one, we're at the moment doing an assessment of what the secondary impact, as I put it, of the consequence of energy prices and other prices, wheat and others going up, for our humanitarian programs in the world. We are not in the business of doing an assessment of what it looks like for a donor country, but we do keep very closely in touch with them on the scale of their generosity. And I think it's going to be clearly a lot of difficult conversations are going to happen over the next weeks or months. On the planning, it's a very good question. And I had the benefit of a meeting this morning with the Ukrainian permanent representative here, who emphasized to me the need for urgency and immediacy. Act today in terms of humanitarian assistance. I said we are, but we're also, and so we are present, we have not left, we're acting today, we are putting together, however, also, in addition to that, a 3-month appeal. So that is looking at a 3-month process. If the situation changes again, and goodness knows how would we know that that may not happen, we will reprogram, we will come back and we will say this is what's happening. Even if in that 3 months we, God forbid, discover that the need becomes less than we fear, we will also come back and say that the displacement was less, or the needs are less, or the disruption is less, whatever. So we'll go out with the 3-month program, but we will keep a very close eye on seeing how it adapts to day-to-day circumstances.
Thank you. Dulcie?
Yeah, I was just wondering how much contingency planning had you done to anticipate this crisis? Thanks.
Good question. We have done quite a lot of contingency planning, but I've been 45 years dealing with conflicts all over the world, and I'm an older man for it, and I have never seen a situation like this in terms of the parameters of contingency planning. I've been involved in contingency planning in Iraq, in Cambodia, in Yemen, in Syria, in many, many different parts of the world, in very big programs in Afghanistan, contingency planning for what might or might not happen in Ukraine was of the highest degree of uncertainty. So what we have been doing is imagining possible scenarios, obviously, but what we've also been doing is also looking into the ways to respond to whatever the needs, the level of needs may rise to. That's my reference to cash, for example. We have, with our friends in the agencies, World Food Programme and others, been standing up the logistical support for any operation. We have sent in, both OCHA, my own office, and agencies, sent in experienced staff into Ukraine. We have an experienced deputy humanitarian coordinator going in, hopefully tomorrow, by road. He was deployed a couple of days ago. He served in a similar role in Afghanistan back in the fall. So we built preparedness, but that's different from knowing the future and knowing what your plan looks like. And that's what we're doing right now, is looking at the plan.
Thank you. We're going to take two questions from the screen. Abdelhamid and then Maggie. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Mr. Griffiths. This is Abdul Hamid Sayan from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Arabi.
Oh, yes, sorry.
I think this conflict will have an impact on the energy prices. News say that the gas prices went up 6 times and the oil prices went about 37%. That will have devastating effect on the poor countries. They might not meet their demands for their public, so that might be more miseries and more tragedies we would see in the next few months. Are you aware of these developments, and how are you going to deal with it, sir?
Well, right now, we're focusing on Ukraine this week and next. We're going to focus on Ukraine, where the crisis is at its highest. As I said earlier, we're looking into the possible consequences of economic shocks, energy prices increasing. I didn't give any figures on those rises, but we're looking into what that might do for our current existing humanitarian response plans for 2022. And as you know, that's already a $41 billion a year set of programs in various different countries. But clearly, one of the aspects, as you know better than me, of the United Nations is it's present in all countries, and staff in all countries will be looking very, very carefully at this. And other colleagues inside the Secretariat are looking already at the issue of shocks and how they may reverberate out into, as you're rightly pointing out, possible increases of poverty and destabilization.
Thank you. We'll take two more questions. Margaret and then Stefano. Maggie?
Hi, Mr. Griffiths. Thanks so much for doing the briefing. If you could give us any more information on numbers of displaced and refugees. I know it's really, really fluid, but I've seen various numbers circulating in the press. So if you could sort of give us some sort of, other than I heard you say hundreds of thousands are on the move, but I just sort of want a number that we can all agree upon for now to kind of use in our reporting, basically. And if you could just talk to us a little about the logistics of what's involved in your aid response, because the country is on the move and multiple cities are under attack. And how do you, I mean, it seems a bit worse than some of the other situations you've been dealing with recently. Can you just give us, because it's very active at the moment, can you give us an idea of how, like, talk us through the logistics? And do you have any concerns about coordinating with the Russians after the problems you had with them in Syria and the deconfliction areas? Do you see them, are you afraid of any problems really working with them in Ukraine? Thanks.
I'm not going to be drawn on the numbers, and Filippo Grandi is really careful with us on this. I totally understand, Maggie, your need for one to pin that. But it's really too early to tell, and just it's so fluid that we don't want to UNHCR doesn't want to give out numbers which then are either too risibly low or too alarmingly high. We know that there are outflows. I think as of some hours ago, there were 50,000 people who had gone into Poland and 20,000 into Moldova. I think those are UNHCR numbers, IOM numbers. But I'm afraid I'm going to not be very helpful to you on that. How to deliver? I mean, Ukraine is different, obviously, from Afghanistan, Somalia, and so forth. And in some ways, they may give us some advantages. Many of the people who are leaving, for example, fleeing now, are people who are going with resources to other places, who are not in immediate urgent need that you would see very differently in Yemen or Somalia, where I was supposed to be this week. The delivery of assistance to those in need, as I said earlier, are going to be partly to those who are displaced, but also partly those who remain in place but need help. And we'll be working, the method, to answer your question, is to work through local partners. The many local organizations, NGOs, faith-based organizations. That's why yesterday, when I had this interagency standing committee meeting, we had the big international NGO and national NGO networks present. They are the ones who know the people in their communities and know where the need will be highest and how to reach those people safely with money, if that's possible, and with goods in kind, if that's necessary. As you know, we deal with any and all authorities necessary for the protection and delivery of humanitarian assistance. And indeed, that includes, in this case, the Russian Federation. And I have had conversations myself this week with them. We will be needing to establish some kind of notification system to allow for the deliveries of assistance. And I'm assured, and I believe that we should be able to do that. But it's too early for us to. I mean, it's 2 days, right, or day and a half. It's too early for us to say exactly how we're going to deal with who at this point, because we don't know. Just like all of us don't know what may happen tomorrow. But we're ready, and the principle of humanitarian assistance, and the one that I have lived by myself for so many years, is to work with any and all people who can help for that safe and principled delivery of assistance.
Thank you. Last question, Stefano Vaccara.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Griffith. Stefano Vaccara, La Voce di New York. My interest is more, I mean, of course, relief is important to give goods, to give food. But my question is about your role, the UN role at the moment in Ukraine as a witness of what's happening. I mean, is your personnel there, is it ready to tell the world what it's saying if human rights are crushed? We've been watching now this morning videos where already you can see that. So are you giving instructions to your personnel to have also this role? And if did you have contact with the Russians, and in this case also Ukrainian authority, about this role that the UN can have in this moment in Ukraine?
I think what you're talking there is about human rights monitoring, not humanitarian. And my lane is humanitarian, not human rights. And I fiercely defend that line. It's important to keep us in our lane because we have different principles. But there are, I want to add, to answer your question, that there are human rights missions in Ukraine. They've been there for many years because of the conflict in the southeast. They remain there. I believe that I understand that the High Commissioner for Human Rights has issued a statement today of concern about certain arrests of protesters, if I understand it. So you can be damn sure that they will do their job under these circumstances as well. the humanitarians, my colleagues, we will also be clear when we see infringements of international humanitarian law, which is different. We'll also be clear in our advocacy, which includes direct contact, to answer another part of your question, in our advocacy with all those who can help us get the aid to the people in need. And, you know, we do this all over the world, as you know. I mean, this is not new. This is a story that has been part of my life all these many years, and a story that's been the part of all our colleagues. So we're ready in Ukraine to do that, and we're ready to stand as witness to humanitarian issues and humanitarian needs. And that's why, if I may, just to round up, that's why I think launching this appeal is going to be an important moment of statement of possible need. And we'll answer some of the questions that you have about scale and numbers. And I hope that we'll be able to do that, launch that very early next week in Geneva. Thanks a lot.
Great. Martin, thank you very much. I hope to see you soon again for further updates, but thank you for taking the time. Okay. And now I'll go on with the
thank you.
The rest of the world.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Cheers, Martin. Thank you.